Hello and welcome to Disclosure Network New York. Today, Sunday, February 3rd, 2019. dnny is a grassroots organization now celebrating our 18th year of providing 2 meetings a month throughout the year in Manhattan. We focus on cutting-edge UFO ET issues, paranormal phenomenon, and many related subjects. Our members do intense investigative research into these various topics and share that information with the group at our meetings and also with our internet followers. Our motto right from day one is, quote, connecting the dots to seek truth, unquote. We have available to everyone worldwide dnny News Blast. It's an email service focusing on the topics of special interest that we all have. You can access that by going to our website, which is dnny.info, typing in your email address where asked for, and press send. You'll then be able to get all the emails about the various subjects we are currently involved with. There's no charge for that service, and it's cutting edge. Our guest speaker today is John Noble. A very warm welcome to you, John.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you.
I'd like to start the interview with a few questions about your background so the audiences get a little bit better idea about you. First of all, if I may ask, where were you born?
I was born in the southeast of England, just outside London.
Ah, okay. And did you come from born into a large family, or brothers and sisters, or no? Or what was that?
One elder sister who, relevant to this story, is now a practicing platform medium, spiritualist. So just to sort of start some of the story, maybe, as a teenager, she's older than me. She used to go to the spiritualist church, and she used to drag me along with her. So at sort of a fairly early age, I saw evidence of the fact that there's something else going on.
Way back when?
Yeah.
And you both. How about your parents or grandparents? Was any of that?
Yeah, a little bit, not a great deal, but down my mother's side, yeah, there was some of this. Yes.
A lot of times that is the case.
Yes.
That down the line, either parents or grandparents, or even further, have some special gifts. We call it whatever they want to classify it. So that goes on, yeah.
But I had none, right? And that's the interesting thing. So that led me into.
That was going to be my next question.
Right.
Was that from that and your early age, was there any issues, challenges during those teen years or beyond that, where in any way anything paranormal experienced, or was there anything like that going on?
No.
Really? No. Okay.
And this is why I love remote viewing. So my sister was full of stories of seeing lights, hearing things, hearing voices, being guided by things, and I'm going, doesn't happen to me.
What's going on?
Yeah, what's going on, right? So I started working in IT, very logical sort of job, right? Analysis of things, very sort of logical, analytical mind. And that's been my career. That's what I still do today, right? So round about 15 years ago, which is around about the time that I came to New York, I suddenly thought there must be more to life than our physical reality.
Excellent.
So I started looking into it a little more. I started reading some books. I kept on coming across Russell Targ's name, Hal Puthoff's name, the SRI program into remote viewing. And here suddenly was something my sister had been talking about, but now sort of in terms of scientific analysis. It also had the element of history, right? Military history.
Okay.
Parapsychology, history of parapsychology, consciousness, how our minds work. So all of a sudden, I was fascinated by this
This opened
topic.
up
Yes.
a huge area for you.
Yes.
How exciting that would have been.
Yeah.
How exciting it is.
Yes.
Still. Well, interesting. So from that point, then where did you go next with your research interests?
So I was reading a lot of books. As I say, I'd never heard of Russell Targ before. I'd never heard of the SRI program, the funding, the government funding of this. So that sort of fascinated me. Continued reading books, and then I noticed that there was a workshop with Russell Targ and Stefan Schwartz in is it pronounced Omega? Up at Rhinebeck? Yeah.
Rhinebeck?
Yeah. A week-long thing about medical intuition. But it was Russell Targ, so I thought, well, I must go. You know, I've read a whole bunch of Russell Targ books. I'm really fascinated. I'd never heard of Stefan Schwartz, but the two of them together basically gave an excellent outline. I mean, these guys were heavily involved with this research at the time. Stefan Schwartz, not on the military side, no sort of government-funded or military funding for Stefan Schwartz, but he sort of went the sort of private route and was very interested in archaeology, so used psychics for archaeology. Whereas obviously Russell was part of the program, heavily part of the program, and they gave an excellent overview. And part of that was workshops, which is basically now what I do on a monthly basis. But the format for that is basically what I picked up from Russell and Stefan during that workshop. That was 2010. I went home. Well, part of that workshop was that the actual sort of like, okay, guys, we're going to do a session, right? Here's how we do it. They gave some simple instructions, and I saw enough from myself and from those around me that there was something actually going on. So this is the turning point for me. Not having basically any psychic experiences my whole life, being able to sit down and under instruction produce something which then matches what the target was, which was hidden up until that point. I'm not a great remote viewer. I find it fascinating. I find the whole thing fascinating.
Oh, me too.
But what really drives me is every now and again I will do something on paper which like really sort of blows my mind. And one of the reasons why I run the monthly group is to just get that same buzz from other people having that same experience. That's what really drives me.
And so what you're saying is that we all are possibly capable of some level of
yes.
remote viewing? Is that it's possible?
Yes, I would say so.
But
so
you have to develop it?
That's questionable. There's people who believe that you cannot train people to be psychic, and there's others that sort of believe that yes, you can. I don't know where I am, but I've got a few things to say about it.
Okay.
On the research side, yeah, basically they came to the understanding that there's a bell curve. In the same way that some of us are excellent violin players or golfers or whatever, right? Any sort of ability that we have. There's people who are just sort of naturally really good, and they practice a bit more, and they focus on it, and they get better and better and better. And there's people who sort of could maybe pick up and play a few notes or sort of hit the ball just about. You know, we can do it a little bit. Most of us are sort of somewhere in the middle sort of thing. So the what they came to believe, and they being this sort of SRI research program, Hal and Targ, Hal Puthoff, Russell Targ, and then later others, that people could do it. And they actually used this to their benefit. So they were often asked by the CIA or whoever was giving them money to do research for demonstrations. Like, okay, you know, we're going to turn up tomorrow and we want to see how the psychic's doing, right? You want to show us your results. We want to see what's going on, what you're doing, right? And they go, yeah, sure, come over, right? And so these people would turn up and they'd say, okay, well, you're going to be the psychic today.
Oh.
They used to turn the tables on these guys. And it's genius, because if you get a psychic to do it, the question is, well, okay, how did they trick us? Right? Obviously, they've got some sort of thing going on. They're just scamming us for money, right? So that was really impressive, but, you know, obviously it's fake, right? They've tricked us in some way.
Some way, yeah.
Right. So by sort of turning the tables and getting the contract monitors to actually be the psychics, it's like, well, how the hell did I do that, right? Okay, all you did was give me some instructions that I just followed, and I'm able to get something that actually shows that there's something going on. So yeah, they firmly believed in this bell curve thing. As I say, there's people that believe that you cannot be trained, or you cannot train to be psychic. However, I think what you can train is how your mind works and how your mind can receive this information, such to make you a sort of a better, conduit or whatever.
Receptor of information.
Yeah.
Oh, you mentioned something just a second ago. You said the government or others who want to use this talent what other groups would like archaeologists? I mean, what other kinds of groups might plug into something like that? Besides, say, the CIA or a group like that? Are there other groups that would perhaps go down that avenue and try to find answers on, say, archaeology? I'm just thinking of that one.
Yeah. So I mean, within the sort of the so-called Stargate program, basically all government agencies, or sort of most of them, actually use these services. In fact, the CIA was actually a very small part of the actual overall funding. So Stargate, right, which is really the wrong name, but it's a nice sort of label to give this thing. Mm-hmm. 22 years, about $20 million. Depending on who you talk to, you know, Paul Smith, who's one of the remote viewers, says there was about 30 different agencies. Ed May, who run the sort of research arm of it for the last part, says about 20 agencies. Many of them coming back again and again and again. CIA, as I think I said, was like 1% of the overall funding. They actually started the program and they finished it, so they're important in that regard. But they were not the main funder. The main funder was actually the U.S. Army and different aspects of the U.S. Army, right? But there were others as well, right? There was money coming from all different agencies for particular little projects, particular little sort of research bits. But the main players were the U.S. Army, Foreign Technologies Division, I think, which is Andrews Air Force Base.
Oh.
I think Foreign Technologies Division, I think, is also famous for the Roswell.
You bet.
Some of the Roswell stuff going there,
and
right?
beyond
so,
that.
Yeah.
Too. So of course. Wow.
Outside of the program, I mean, so 95 it closed down. The stuff was released in dribs and drabs. Most of it is now released, but because of the release, people like Paul Smith, Lynn Buchanan, Morehouse, Ed Dames, probably heard of, probably others, but certainly those four who were some of the actual original military remote viewers started writing books, setting up their own companies, training people, so that now you have people that have been trained by those people who are now setting up their own companies and training people. A big push at the moment is something called associative remote viewing, where you associate an outcome with a target. Now, there's reasons for that, and I'm happy to talk about this later, but basically, using this method, you can then predict outcomes.
Oh.
So in the case of maybe a sports game, right, there's two potential outcomes. So you associate one outcome with an orange and another outcome with something that's not an orange, right? Something rectangular, like a radiator, right? Something that's a different shape, a different color, a different texture, right? All these sorts of things are good sort of remote viewing material, right? So you say to the remote viewer, what object am I going to show you on Tuesday or something next week? So the remote viewer, you do a session and you describe something that's round and orange, and that's great. That's sort of enough.
You're focusing on.
Yeah, you're focusing on what you're going to see next Tuesday.
Okay.
Right? You don't know anything about the sports game. You don't know anything about what's going on. I've just asked you a question, and what am I going to show you next Tuesday? You do your session, you describe something that's round and orange. You give that back to me, and I go, okay, that's interesting, because the orange was associated with Team A winning. Right? I'd already set that up. This is associative remote viewing. There's a big drive to use this for stock markets and sports betting.
I can imagine. Oh my God, it goes on and on as far as that goes. How about looking at what the big lottery number is going to be in next month? I mean, it could. I don't know if it could go that far, but I mean,
it's difficult. Difficult. No,
different people would use it for different things.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. Finding lost things, I've done a little bit of
lost
that.
Things, okay.
Is a big thing, and that's a very good sort of example of remote viewing, because remote viewing, its core strength is description.
Okay.
Right.
So the more descriptive, the better you have as far as what you're targeting. Could that be for, say, what if, just as an example, North Korea? Are they dismantling all their weaponry or not? With their, and we kind of know where specifically things are there, you know, what the factories are, so forth. Would it be possible to try to focus on a particular region?
Yeah.
And it would be, okay.
And in fact, there's examples of that from the military side of the program.
Of
right?
course, That would be huge.
There's a specific example which is basically exactly that, and it's a really interesting story. Shall I?
Oh, please,
yeah, right.
absolutely.
So Joe McMoneagle, maybe some of you have heard of Joe McMoneagle, right? He's one of the most amazing remote viewers. He gets shipped out to Japan on a fairly regular basis, and live television he will find people, and he'll actually do sessions, and he'll describe locations of where these missing people are. And they'll have a camera crew, and they'll run round they'll try and work out where it is, and they'll go round there, and they'll find, and this person's been missing for 20 years, and they'll find them on television. He's done that many times live.
I went to a lecture many moons ago, and it was exactly about that. And they had a map, and they were showing regions, and the remote viewer at one point said, "That's the area there."
Yeah.
And they specifically said what the region would look like, whether there were trees, or they were describing it to some degree. And the bottom line is, that's where they were.
So
big wow for that.
Yeah,
one.
no, it is. It's quite extraordinary to see, and it gives a real sort of like, the thing that I get out. I mean, the big thing that I get out of it is, I'll get back to Joe in a minute.
Sure.
But just let me because it's actually, it really does sort of get me excited. Right?
Please do.
What it proves is the fact that we are more than just physical beings, right? That's the big thing for me. It's like, my view of death, for example, has completely changed, right?
Yep.
I sort of now strongly believe my consciousness is not dependent on my physical body. It can be separate. It probably is separate most of the time, right? There's bits of me that are sort of all over the place, right? Yeah. So that gives life a different meaning. Anyway, back to Joe. So one of the tasks he was given was no, I won't get into that. He was given a photograph of basically the roof of a building, and that's all he was given. And he was asked what's happening inside the building. Now, the backstory that he was not told was that by satellite imagery, this place was in Russia, by satellite imagery, they knew that there was a lot of materials going into this place. A lot of equipment, a lot of people, a lot of stuff going into the building. And they're going, well, what the hell's going on, right? And this is in the middle of Russia somewhere, not in the middle, it's like thousands of miles away from anywhere. They couldn't get anybody in there, right? So they want to know what's happening inside. So Joe McMoneagle, and this basically, I think nearly sort of everything I'm saying, you can research, you can look it up, you can look up these sessions, you can find all this stuff. It's all online. It's all in books and online. Basically, Joe describes, they're building things. It takes him a while, right? He does a number of sessions over quite an extended period, like loads of bits of paper. Eventually, he starts drawing a submarine. And actually, I think the text is very large submarine. And he describes the missile tubes and the position of the conning tower thing, and the fact that there's a very interesting sort of drive mechanism, all of which was against current submarine design thinking. There was a lot of things that if you gave it to a submarine person, and this is what they did, right? You gave it to somebody who sort of knows about submarines. They go, well, that's not right, because that wouldn't work, right? That's all wrong, right? No, you're obviously just making all this stuff up. This was for the NSA, National Security Agency. I think the Navy were obviously very interested as well. So Joe finishes his sessions, they sort of hand it in, it all gets analysed, and it's basically, well, this is nonsense. One, because it's coming from remote viewing, which, we don't believe, and two, it doesn't look anything like a submarine. No one could build a submarine that big, right? Because basically Joe says it's huge. He sort of actually defines how big it is, how many tubes it's got, missile tubes, and everything, right? So, but basically they say, no, this can't possibly be right. So he does another session to try and find out when it's going to be launched. The other thing I forgot to mention is the building is actually like a mile or so away from the sea.
Oh.
So he's basically laughed at. So he does another session. He works out. He says, okay, I think it's going to be ready, in about 4 or 5 months' time. So they managed to get some satellites over it round about that time, slightly later. and they had dug a big trench, and they'd wheeled out, whatever the term is for launching a submarine, probably not wheeled out. And it was the largest submarine created. It is the Typhoon class. It was named the Typhoon by the US. It's got its own Russian name, obviously. And it was a big surprise.
Big surprise,
right?
Yeah.
Whereas Joe knew about it like 6 months earlier.
Incredible. Absolutely amazing.
And that was just from a photograph of the roof.
If that doesn't tell us something about how accurate it could be, because the thing picking it out of air so far away from the water, it doesn't seem logical that would be there. That's incredible. Thank you for that story. Wow.
It's so remote viewing and the military program and the research stuff is just full of this stuff. It's quite extraordinary.
I can imagine. Do you want to go into another area?
I can talk about how it's.
I also have some questions. I'm sure the audience does.
Yeah,
too.
no, I'm happy for questions.
But I want you to do whatever you need.
No, my notes are all sort of fitting into all this.
Well,
I've got a sort of a historical sort of like layout of how the program started and how it ended, which we can talk about separately. But I'm happy for any questions or if you have.
I'll shoot you just a couple quick ones.
Yeah, sure.
Remote viewing, I was wondering, and my partner Hal and I were talking about your interview today, and one of the questions we had was, when you're doing remote viewing, does it have to be immediate of what's going on in this time, or could you project into a different time past?
Yeah.
People do that.
It's known as non-local.
Okay, so it could be different time zone, a different time period. Other than what's not now, and if that were true, how does it happen? Because viewer means you're looking, but you can't interact with what you're seeing. If you know what I'm going with this, so it's like you're viewing something from either a time distance or a mile distance, but you can't interfere with that in any way, can you?
I don't know. Maybe you can,
okay,
right?
All right.
There's something called remote influencing, which I guess some people believe. Lynn Buchanan, who's one of the military guys, now sort of strongly tries to influence his past self. So in the current time, he would try and influence himself in the past to make correct decisions based on information he knows now. He also tries to influence people's health and well-being. And he's got some interesting stories in that regard. This was obviously not part of the SRI program, but I think Lynn's thinking is if you can view something, you can potentially sort of affect it. And actually this ties back into maybe one of the first experiments, which is pretty interesting.
Sure.
It's part of how the program started. Basically, Ingo Swann. New York artist, psychic. If you don't know his paintings, just Google him and look at some of the paintings. They're extraordinary. Quite a character.
Do you know where the city is from?
Not from New York. I don't know where he's from. No, originally. He died a couple of years ago.
Let's not do the questions now. Let him go through what he has to go through. Then we'll go to the questions.
Okay,
I don't
sure.
want to I want you to do that.
Yeah, so Ingo Swann, psychic, he'd done some research at ASPR, which is 4 or 5 miles north of here, right? He'd done, that's where the first experiment that was called remote viewing actually took place.
Oh, really? Oh, didn't know that.
In New York. So we're here, yes. That was late 1971. He'd also done some other experiments with Cleve Baxter and Gertrude Smidler, I think is the pronunciation, City College in New York, just testing his abilities. But they were done in a sort of scientific fashion, right? So he had some papers that sort of described this stuff written by scientists, the fact that he'd done some of this stuff. He was friends with Cleve Baxter, famous polygraph person, hooking up plants to polygraphs and sort of pretending he's, thinking you're going to burn the plant and getting some sort of reaction. Cleve had done a whole bunch of stuff like this and was doing some experiments with Ingo. Hal Puthoff, Navy guy, security clearances, professor, author of a very technical book on quantum mechanics, a sort of real sort of brainy guy. He's working at Stanford College. He's a professor. But he wants to get out of that. He's written this book. He's interested in consciousness. He's interested in other sorts of things that are around us, but we don't actually have physical terms for them. So that's all sort of quantum mechanics sort of side of things. He reads Cleve Baxter's book. He's interested in some of Cleve's experiments. So he writes to Cleve and says, I've got an idea for an experiment. What do you think? That's lying around on Cleve's desk. Ingo is in there. They're talking about it. I just got this letter from Hal Puthoff. Ingo reads it and says, well, that's interesting, right? But he's talking about cultures and measuring waves from cultures, right? Basically, you get a culture, you split it into two, you affect one half, and you sort of measure what happens on the other half, right? That was the basis of his thing. Ingo says, well, why does he want to work with cultures? Why doesn't he work with me, right? I can sort of do that sort of stuff, and I can tell him what's going on, right? He should work with humans. Ingo writes to Hal. Hal invites him to California, SRI, where they are, and they set up an experiment. And the reason for you reminded me of this is this influencing aspect, which I'll get onto. So Ingo, Hal is this very sort of serious scientific guy. He says to his colleagues at SRI, you know, it's a government think tank, right? It gets money for doing scientific experiments. It doesn't mess around with crazy psychic artists. I've got this crazy psychic artist coming to me next week, and they go, you what? You know, what? You better give him a good experiment, right? Because none of us are going to be interested in talking to him or listening to what you've got to say unless you can really sort of give him something serious to do. So he thinks about it. In one of the buildings at SRI, there's a highly shielded scientific tool called a magnetometer, which is measuring sort of gamma rays or something. I don't know. It's way out of my understanding. But it's shielded by everything, right? It's acoustically shielded, electrically shielded, magnetism, basically everything, right? Because it needs to be, because it's just measuring these very special things, and it can't be perturbed by anything. That was the whole thing. It's basically sort of, you know, it's embedded in the floor. It's about 9 foot down. There's concrete, there's steel.
Wow.
Right, it's a very serious sort of thing, right? And it's just there, and the output of this thing is being measured by computers and tracked. So so Ingo turns up off the flight, basically. Hal goes and picks him up, drives him straight to this place, and says, okay, we're in this building. Imagine it's this building, right? So Ingo, there's something down beneath the floor. Can you describe it for me? So Ingo, he's got a little notepad, and he starts drawing it. He can't see it, obviously, right? But he starts drawing this little sort of mechanism, and there's little sort of, you know, there's wheels in it and stuff. But while he's doing this, the output of it changes.
Oh.
And the guy running the sort of responsible for it is going, what the hell's going on, right? Who is this guy? This thing's supposed to be imperturbable.
Something is coming in?
Yes.
Something's coming in.
The thing is aware of his awareness or whatever it is that is affecting it. Right?
Oh boy.
So not only is he able to describe it, but he's also affecting it, right? So there's some evidence that there is this remote influencing either on a macro PK level, but as far as Lynn Buchanan is concerned, we can affect each other, and we know we can affect each other, right? We've got these fields around us. We know we can sense things.
Speak louder, please.
Sometimes, can we hold this, please?
I'm sorry?
Please? I'm sorry. So, all right, so that we can do that, and I think this room, pretty sensitive people here, and they pick up on all this, and there's been stories among us of feeling things before it happens, or getting signals of fear sometimes when
Indeed.
it didn't look like there was something to be concerned about,
Yes.
but there was something to be concerned about. So in a way, that's the field there can go in different directions. That's my point.
Yes. I think there's many stories, right? The whole sort of ASPR stuff and the Society for Psychical Research in London have been sort of tracking this sort of stuff for hundreds of years. Stories of mothers and children, distant places, you know. Yes, exactly.
Incredible. As far as archaeology goes, and for instance, the pyramids has always been a mystery of how they built something like that. Has there been any research to go remotely to a different time and take a look and see if they could figure out how they were being built? Has any research, do you know of anything like that?
I don't know of anything like that. I mean, I'm aware of things like Amelia Earhart looking into that.
Okay, that would be another one.
Certainly you can do that. They're normally sort of run as projects, meaning that there's somebody will come up with the idea to research a particular thing, and then we'll get a bunch of different remote viewers. Because in the same way that if we all saw an accident, if we were all standing outside in the road and there was an accident, we would all have slightly different perceptions of it, right? And that's just the way we work. And the same thing happens psychically, right? We all have our own strengths and weaknesses in how we interpret and record, and things that we notice and things that we don't notice. So it's quite often best, and this is how Stefan Swartz works with archaeology. He will get a group of viewers to sort of scan a particular area or whatever, and he'll sort of, where things line up with multiple different viewers, the same information, he'll sort of circle those sorts of things and look at those first. Not to say that because only one person got some particular thing is not necessarily right, but there's maybe more weight to the fact that there's collaborating information.
Picking up something similar, that there's a thread there.
Yeah.
Very interesting. There's a remote viewer, and I cannot think of the name. I was reading about it recently, and he said, in the last week, he said that this year, when asked the question of things he could see happening in the United States within 2019, he said a major earthquake is going to happen. And he also said a meltdown of a major nuclear facility that is going to be huge. This is really bad news, but I mean, he said that, who knows, but he said that he felt so strongly that was going to come up within a year in America somewhere.
I have a few examples of things like this that have not come to pass. I think for some reason, although remote viewing is sort of non-local and does not appear to be bound by space and time, things that are trying to look into the future, there's several examples of them getting it very wrong. In fact, I was involved in a project about a year ago which predicted that there would be I've forgotten I think it's in Tenerife or somewhere. There's a big sort of island, and it's been known that if there's an earthquake there, a large chunk of it will fall into the sea, and there'll be a massive tidal wave coming over to us.
Was that the Canary Islands?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that it? Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So I was involved in a project recently where, is anything going to happen on the East Coast? Nothing to do with that, but just looking for some interesting things, right? And I really don't know how it was set up. I didn't set it up. I was just one of the remote viewers on it. And there were a bunch of us. From this, the project concluded that this was going to happen, and it was going to happen, I think, towards the end of last year. It's on a website, if you want to look at it. I don't know if it's still up, because it hasn't happened, right? But the person who ran the project was so concerned that she then tasked a whole bunch of other remote viewers, a different group, and they got the same thing, that something dreadful was going to happen. There was going to be people running away and drowning and disasters and everything, right? This was going to happen last year.
Was it going to be natural disasters?
It was because of this Canary Islands thing.
Oh, okay. A natural occurrence.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So that's one example that I was involved in that was going to happen last year. There's several others. Somebody did Courtney Brown. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Courtney Brown. He did a large exercise on climate change, major cities around the world, how they were going to be affected, and this was going back maybe 5 or 6 years. And again, supposedly it's already happened, right? But again, the same thing. There was going to be disasters. There was going to be massive death. Again, didn't happen. Another one is Courtney Brown predicting there was going to be an earthquake in LAX, and LAX was going to be destroyed.
Wow.
And this was maybe going back now, maybe 10 years. Didn't happen. Now, Courtney's explanation is that it happened on a different timeline,
Oh,
which is a nice little get
Whoa.
out. Yeah, so you would have thought that, okay, you were asking the question, you were asking about our timeline, but maybe we just don't understand reality, and maybe it did really happen.
that
in
is
some
such
way,
an
right?
incredible area that I think we're all fascinated with that area there, because it opens up, again, more dimensions that we just beginning to even realize are there. So yeah, that's quite an explanation.
So any time there's any sort of prediction, especially involving disasters, it's like, yeah, okay.
Okay, yeah, I can understand that. You may be able to answer this, and if not, I totally understand. Have you been employed with the government? Or is that something, or other major companies? Or if we can't go there, that's okay.
I've been contacted by the authorities. Let's just
Okay,
leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that, and that's
Yeah.
perfectly fine. One of the main interests here is UFO research. We're very
Yes.
deep, as you know, we're very deep into that subject and paranormal phenomenon. And on the subject of UFO and ETs, we have been deep into research of that for like 18 years, some of the people in the group. And some of the things that are on the media continually, well, maybe there is life on other, I mean, it goes into such craziness that you're thinking, oh, really? You're putting that out there when we know that you, so another area that would be so interesting to know of what contact has there been with whom on this planet and what deals were. Because Eisenhower, for instance,
Right.
is said to have made a major deal with an ET group, and I interviewed a Major George Filer a few months ago, an incredible man, an amazing man, and we're going to have him again a couple of months from now. And George was there, he said, that when that was going on. He was there when the craft was in an area of the facility. Whoa, and he said there was a deal made. Is there any research, any remote viewers have ever gone into that area in any way, not just specifically the Eisenhower episode, but any other areas of ET?
Yeah, actually quite a lot.
Have
For
they?
some reason, there's remote viewing is sort of fairly closely associated with UFO research.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm really happy to hear that.
Yeah, I think because of a few individuals. I don't know if I am, right? But yeah, let's go with it, right? So Ed Dames, we're familiar with Ed Dames,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
He's on Art Bell a lot, and now Nori's program, Doctor Doom. So lots of predictions about terrible things happening again, right? So a grain of salt there. But he's sort of fascinated in this sort of stuff. He's fascinated in remote viewing. He's fascinated in UFOs and alien contact. He's also fascinated or driven to use remote viewing for good to help find missing people, which is great. Just maybe some of the predictions, maybe
Sure.
there's I have an issue with, but he was one of the original remote viewers that was trained. He was in the military. He was trained by Ingo Swann. So Ingo Swann we spoke about earlier, doing the experiment with Hal Puthoff. That sort of turned into the program. One of the sort of outputs of that was a training methodology that was then sort of used by the military. So that has a name. That's controlled remote viewing. That's Ingo Swann and Hal Puthoff trying to sort of codify Ingo's process such that it could then be taught. So Ed Dames was one of the original guys who was trained, and he sort of became a bit of a training officer for the military group. And during their sort of off time, they used to run practice targets. Now, Ed Dames, very interested in UFOs, used to target his group with UFOs and alien sort of stuff. So actually within the government files are these sessions with the guys describing UFOs and aliens, and I've forgotten the name. I mean, some of them are it's great sci-fi. I don't know where it's coming from, And see, this is the issue with it, and it's in strict terms, it's not, they're not very good at all practice targets, because there's no definitive yes you got it right or yes you got it wrong. You can't tell because you don't know. But yes, Ed Dames is fascinated by this stuff. Joe McMoneagle has done some stuff. Actually, on YouTube, there's recordings of Joe being interviewed in another methodology called ERV.
What is that, please?
That is extended remote viewing. And it's called extended just because it took longer. And basically, that's a different style of remote viewing where basically the remote viewer is lying down, very relaxed. What's it called? Before you go to sleep, there's a word for it.
Hypnagogic state.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. So your sense of yourself is drifted away. You're then sort of prompted with, okay, Joe, here's the target number. Describe where you are. And basically, it's on Mars, like millions of years ago, and there's large beings walking around, and there's descriptions of buildings and stuff like that. So Mars is a good target. Aliens are good targets. There's a book available. I've forgotten the guy's name, but he basically engaged Joe McMoneagle to do a number of sessions on UFO cases. And it's actually very fascinating. One of them is a fake, and it's not sure. By looking at it, you'd say, "Wow, that's amazing," sort of thing. Joe gets in there and he describes it's basically a lamp, it's a glass bowl with a light bulb in it, sort of thing, and it's a fake. Whereas there's others and he's describing craft and the intent of the craft, what actually happened. So it's a very good book. I think I've mentioned it in here.
Well, let's tell the listeners and the people here today the title of the book.
Right. So
your book. That's the only book so far you've written, correct?
Yes. This is the actual the second edition.
I'm going to hold it up. And so, how long ago did you write this?
This edition, I think, it's been out for about only 8 months or so.
Oh, really? So
yeah.
It's very new.
It's
is it on Amazon?
Yes, it is on Amazon.
And how about
yes.
Barnes and Noble?
Yes. For the Nooks and stuff, yes, it should be, yes.
Okay, so
yes.
Natural remote viewer, a practical guide to the mental, the mental
martial art of self-discovery.
Oh, that's interesting. That is interesting.
That's not this mental martial art business is a term that I think Stephen Schwartz came up with.
Oh.
It's how he approaches it. It's like a training of the mind. The same sort of conviction and intent and attention that you put into something like a martial art. That's what you need.
That's where you got the...
Yeah.
It grabs you.
Yeah.
It does grab you. And I want to ask you, too, about... are you currently conducting any classes or lectures, or I just wanted to get that in?
My main thing is this monthly group. I say monthly. It's just about monthly. It's a practice group.
Oh.
The idea is to practice because, as I say, I get the biggest buzz I get out of this is people getting something right.
I can totally understand that, of course.
So I just love doing that. So I will set up targets. I'll come to the meeting with targets, and we'll run through stuff, and we'll talk about any news. We'll talk about any questions. Very often there's new people, so I will actually sort of describe the process, the simplified process. Occasionally, maybe once or twice, maybe 3 times a year, I will actually run a sort of a training course, and actually sort of step through. And basically, that's what the book is. The book is about 80% how to do it. The rest of it is some of the little history stuff, and then there's a section on sort of consciousness and how our minds work related to this aspect.
If one wanted to access that, where is it held, and can you give us a little more detail about that?
Yeah.
Is it open to the public?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I'm on Meetup as well, meetup.com. It's free to join Meetup, I think. Yeah, it is free to join Meetup. It's free to join my group, obviously. But I do.
What's the name of the group?
It's the remote viewing practice group.
Okay.
There you go.
Easy enough to remember.
Easy enough, yeah.
Right.
NYC.
Right, John Noble, okay.
Yeah.
And then from
Or
there
you can just
they can understand where it's going to be and how to access that.
Yeah, it's normally in sort of Midtown. It's normally on a Saturday afternoon, but the times and everything,
It's all there.
It's all there, yeah.
Excellent, excellent. I also, if you will give me that information too, I'm going to put it on our website.
Oh, great. Okay.
So it's also
Thank
there.
you.
Because there'll be people that are listening to this and they want to know more. So, wonderful. Where would you like to go from here as far as your content? Do you want to go into any particular area, or we covered quite a bit already? I mean, it's great, and we're good with time right now. So
I can talk. So there's maybe something else to say about UFOs, if that would be of interest.
that would be wonderful. Absolutely. I think you'd have an audience here who'd like to hear more.
I don't have a lot of details, as maybe you've gathered. It's not a big topic for me, but there's an interesting little story.
Please.
Pat Price. Anyone? He's a very interesting character and with an interesting story. A police commissioner, I believe, in California, Burbank, who actually used to sort of wait round the corner for the crime to happen that he knew was going to happen.
Ooh. Before it happened. That's
So Russell Tides.
that's sci-fi. Easy.
So he found out that there was some, and this is odd, right? This is odd. So supposedly this program starts, the CIA come in to Russell Targ and they give him some money and they say, I know you've been working with Ingo. We want you to do some experiments. We want to see if there's anything in there. And the backstory to that is, right, Cold War, the Russians are spending a lot of money on this sort of stuff. They're saying through defectors, and we're finding out that they're saying that they can do amazing things.
How about the Chinese? Just quick.
I don't know if it plays into it, but probably yes. But at the time, the Cold War was the whole sort of Russian thing, right? So
Yep.
CIA are concerned enough to investigate.
Okay.
Let's just say that, right? So they give Hal some money. Hal's got the clearances. He's working at an approved agency that they've already got contracts with. So he's a real sort of, and he's interested in this stuff. He's worked with Ingo. So it's like, yeah, we want you to do some experiments. So Ingo turns up and they actually do some experiments. And it's things like things hidden in envelopes, things hidden in boxes. Ingo's getting frustrated. This is just a waste of my talent. I can send my consciousness around the world, and you're asking me to look what's in the envelope. Like, give me something I can, useful I can do. So they start coming up with other experiments, and eventually they get into this thing called coordinate remote viewing, which is given some coordinates, some map coordinates. The remote viewer is then able to describe, again, remote viewing description, describe that location. Right? So this is how it started. So the first test of this, SRI, Hal and Russell, they ring up their CIA counterpart and they say, we've got to, we're moving away from envelopes and boxes and stuff like that. We've got a new way of doing things. We've been testing it. We think I think you're going to be interested in it. Could you give us some coordinates of something that you know well, that we don't know? We won't sort of look them up or anything. You just give us some coordinates, and it's a specific building or something, whatever you want, right? And just give us those coordinates. So the guy says, yeah, sure, okay, I'll do that. He doesn't want to do it himself, so he walks down the hall and he goes to see somebody. He says, you got some coordinates of something interesting? And the guy thinks about it for a bit and says, yeah, sure, okay. And he's sort of like, I'll get back to you, right? So he looks up some coordinates of the place that he's got in mind. He writes them down. He gives it to the CIA guy. CIA guy rings up SRI and tells them. So Ingo Swann does a session, and here's an oddment of the story that doesn't quite fit. This was all supposed to be secret, right? Somehow, Pat Price knows about this and contacts them, rings up Hal and says, I understand you're doing some psychic research. I'm a psychic. I can help you. I don't know how that connection happened, right? It's not explained. There's a possible thing which I'll get onto in a minute, which does explain it, but it's never really articulated how that connection came about. Anyway, so now you've got Pat Price and you've got Ingo Swann. They both do sessions on these coordinates, and they describe what looks like a military facility. Ingo Swann draws a nice map of it. Says there's a flagpole, US flag. It's secret. It's a sort of secret sort of military place. Pat Price goes even further. He says there's an underground area. There's offices, there's desks, there's computers, there's filing cabinets, and here's some names I've written down. It's like black ball, red ball, like sort of snooker or billiards sort of terms, right?
Okay.
And he's just written these things down as part of his session. So they hand this over to the CIA. And the guy that they contacted has no idea what it is anyway, right? Because it's his friend's coordinates. So he calls in his friend and he says, okay, does this match what the thing you gave us? And the guy goes, no, not at all. That's absolutely wrong, right? It's not, that's all wrong, right? It's totally nonsense. He'd given the coordinates of his little sort of cabin in the woods. That's what he was expecting. But about a quarter of a mile away is Sugar Hill it's National Security Agency, big secret military spying complex.
Not that far away.
Not that far away. Down the road, right?
Down the road.
Right?
Down the road a piece.
And so one of the things that they learned from this was the fact that remote viewing will sort of find the most interesting thing, not the boring little log cabin. Right? Actually, there's something far more interesting sort of just over there, right? So they both described this thing. Pat Price's code words were all highly secret code words that nobody should ever have known.
Wow. Oh boy.
This nearly killed the program because there was a massive investigation because the only way they could have got this information was whether they were spying, right? They were obviously sort of infiltrated this place.
Love that. Wow. That's incredible. That's a wonderful story. Wonderful story.
Well, actually, so no, it's just talking about Pat Price. So the thing about the UFOs is Pat Price just loved doing this, right? He thought it was fantastic fun, right? So he turns up like a week later in Hal's office, and he said, that thing we did with Sugar Hill NSA, I thought that was great, right? So just for fun, I thought I'd research UFO bases around the world.
Just for fun.
I've got this big stack of paper, right? He's sort of described 5 UFO bases around the world in great detail, right? What's in there, what's happening, the types of craft, where they are. Means nothing to Hal, right? Hal's a scientist. He's going, okay, well that's interesting.
Right. Where are we going with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
However, right, it carries on. It's now got a life of its own. I've forgotten the name of the project. I'm sorry, I should have written it down. But again, if you sort of Google Pat Price UFO bases, there's a talk on it by Skip Atwater, one of the sort of military guys, because Hal gave it to Atwater and said, look, I'm not going to do anything with this. It doesn't mean anything to me. It's not useful, right? But you guys, maybe you could retask people on it. You might get some interesting results. And that's exactly what Atwater did. Ed Dames loved it, of course. So the military did a whole bunch of sessions on it, blind, right? Because that's what remote viewing is, I should have mentioned, right? There's certain protocols. You need to be blind. So those remote viewers did sessions on it and basically got corroborating information on it as well. So that's interesting. Pat Price, so a couple of other interesting things about Pat Price. Pat Price was a Scientologist, a heavy, big-time Scientologist, as was Ingo, as was Hal. So this may be the connection that brought Pat Price to Hal, I'm not sure. Pat Price was, as I say, a big Scientologist. He would go from meetings with Hal and Targ, Hal and Russell and Ingo. He'd go straight to the Scientology and tell them the meetings, what happened in the meetings. And this was found out later.
Wow. Try not to do that.
One other thing about Hal and one other thing about Pat Price, fascinating. I mean, Russell Targ's books talk about Pat Price. You can tell there's a real affinity between the two of them. They spent a lot of time together in a small room, Russell being the monitor. The CIA stopped funding the program in about '74, right? So they initiated it, they sort of set it up, they gave the initial money, but for various reasons, maybe the involvement, Watergate was happening at the time, they were focused on other things, right? They sort of backed out of it. But they continued to ask for projects, they continued asking for work to be done, and they hired Pat Price directly into the CIA. Now, if they've hired one person, it's possible that they hired others, right? So when the program closes in '95, have the CIA got their own thing going on? Don't know. I'm not saying either way, but the fact that they made that hire, right,
exactly
means
right.
that that's the sort of thing they could do.
One thing we've been floored at with doing some research and what people are saying is how many billions of dollars are not accounted for that can be anywhere. And we're still beginning to just realize how wild that card is and where it could be going. So on something as important as remote viewing, I think a good educated guess was there's a lot of funding still going on. I would bet my bottom dollar, especially with what's going on. So anyhow, for what that's worth,
yeah, I don't know. I mean, Paul Smith, one of the military guys, I think Ed May, I think the research head, think that they know the players involved enough that they would know. I don't know. But they feel that they would know if something was going on, and they say that they don't think that anything is going on.
Yeah, and this is not the kind of information that is going to go out there without a fight, so to speak. There's a lot of guarded information that they will do anything to keep private, so they're not under national security, which covers
possibly
so much stuff.
Yeah.
It can be used in so many ways, unfortunately too. It goes both ways on that. Wonderful. All right. Is there any other area we could talk about now on your notes, and then we'll throw it out to some questions. And while you're looking, guys, the way to do the questions would be to form in your mind one sentence, and there won't be a back and forth. One sentence that is very clear of what you want to ask. Is that understood? All right. And there's reasons for that. And again, keep your voice really up high. It's okay. It's called for because the mic is there. It's a good sensitive mic, but if you're talking at a normal voice range like I am, you're not going to be heard, and that's not good for the viewers, for the listeners. Okay, so understand that. And I'm going to go this way in the room, but I'll try to get to everybody. Okay, once we go to.
No, I'm good. So I mean, whatever I've got written down.
Okay, so we can just start with a few more.
Questions
I'm going to go this way. Does anybody have a formulated one-sentence question they'd like to ask? We'll go with you first. Say your first name.
Hi, my name's Kira. I was curious if you would be willing to tell us in a basic way what the process of a session would be. What would somebody be told to do, directed to do? Like, here's your target number. Are we closing our eyes? Are we calming our mind? Like, what would a simple process be?
So protocols is a good word. There's protocols and methodology, right? And then they are two separate things, right? So there's some core protocols. One is sort of the blindness thing, which I've mentioned, right? So the idea is that you don't have. It's different from maybe a psychic reading where you're going, I want to know about my job, right? I'm concerned about my job. I've got this going on in my life. What can you tell me, right? So that doesn't really happen. It's more like, here's your target number, it's reference number. And that's about all you get. So second maybe protocol is everything's written down. If it's not written down, it doesn't count, right? You can't say, afterwards, I knew it was that, but I didn't write it down. That doesn't count. Those are the sort of two core things. As for methodology, there's different methodologies. I've mentioned a couple, right? CRV, controlled remote viewing, which is a very structured thing that really you need to learn and spend time practicing. But there's a simpler approach, which is this, in my book, which is really about quietening the mind. And the thing is, it's more sort of freestyle. So if you feel more comfortable closing your eyes, that's absolutely fine. Some people in CRV would say, no, you need to be eyes open. But I think, this sort of more freestyle approach, you would do whatever you needed to do yourself. So that might be a period of meditation, some sort of cool down where you're losing track of the physical, you're losing track of the everyday, you're focusing on your feelings and your inner world, you're bringing your attention to the target number, that's your link to the target, so you're focusing on that, and then you're describing how you feel and what you're sensing. You do this in a sort of structured, methodologically way, I'll speak properly, where you're running through each of your senses, right? So you're getting textures, you're running through, can I hear anything? I'm at the target. You're really sort of putting yourself at the target, and you're trying to describe. You can sort of physically reach out and say, okay, I'm now touching it. What can I feel? And so on. So basically you sort of run through all this process. One of the sort of tenets of remote viewing is that the sort of longer that you spend with the target, the more sort of detailed or more sort of complex type of information that you'll get. So you start off with rough, smooth descriptors, beige, flat, very short sort of descriptive words. But then later on you'll be able to say things like, it's got a functional use, it's a table, maybe, you might even name it. But the goal is not to name it. The goal is to describe.
Thank you for your,
So I think in a nutshell, that's it. But come along to a meeting and we'll run through it.
Thank you for your question. It was a great question. We have a hand up in the same area. Go ahead first. Go ahead. Your first name?
Hi, my name is Jonah. I wanted to know if there was a difference between psychics and remote viewing, and if so, what are the differences and which one is more advanced or harder to learn?
Yeah, no, great question actually. I should have sort of mentioned this before, right? So remote viewing is a sort of an application of being a psychic. So the underlying ability is psychic, right? The underlying thing that is driving this is psychic ability. Remote viewing, as we've just sort of discussed, is more of a sort of a set of protocols, a set of methodologies of how we use this psychic ability. It's on top of, I guess, right? So some people don't need to learn anything about remote viewing. They're just naturally gifted psychics. I mean, Pat Price, Ingo Swann, they were just naturally gifted psychics. But what they came up with these protocols and methods, because this is one of the things that the CIA asked them to do. How can we train this to other people? We've got a whole bunch of military guys who aren't natural, right? How can we? What steps can we give them to actually, so we don't have to sort of go out and find psychics. Sort of, we can just draw from within our own group, and we can use the people that we already have. So the two things are very closely related, but remote viewing is just a sort of an application of being psychic.
Basic version for the general public.
Thank you for your question. Jim.
Well, thank you so much. This is awesome. And your book is amazing, by the way. If anyone is interested in remote viewing, read the book. It's great. And this class is great too. I've done the class. Well, my question is also about a handler. When you remote viewer, that relationship seems really important. And it's not talked about a lot.
No.
That handler that's giving you that target.
Yeah.
And it's like making sure that remote viewer is like following those protocols, properly.
Yeah.
Can you just talk about that relationship?
Yeah, and I think the reason it's sort of fallen away is it's sort of boring being a handler or monitor, right? You're sitting down with somebody and they're having the psychic vacation, and you're just sort of sitting there, sort of trying to guide them and make sure they're on track. Yeah, it was done a lot in the military and at SRI. That was Russell's job. He would sort of like sit next to people and sort of guide them through. There's a very good write-up. He talks about it in his books of him and Hella Hamid, another brilliant remote viewer, remote viewing Brezhnev's office. And Hella saying things like, well, I'm in a hallway and there's a door in front of me. And Russell Todd going, well, okay, let me open the door for you. Okay, great. All right, well, it's dark inside. Russell goes, okay, I'll turn the lights on. So I think so part of that it's quite funny, but I think what it's doing is it's giving the remote viewer a helping hand, some guidance, as well as the things you said, right? So making sure that they're on track. Another thing that happens is if the monitor knows that there's a specific piece of information required and it's got something to do with a particular building or a person or whatever, the remote viewer may not know that and will start describing a whole bunch of things, and the monitor can sort of guide them to, okay, you mentioned this building, let's go and look at the building, right? Let's go inside the building, right? Can sort of direct the remote viewer to the specific area of concern. But yeah, it's not done very often these days. I think it's actually a very, because the other way to do it the other way of getting more information is doing what's called retasking, where you sort of, the remote viewer does one session, it hands it into the person says, well, actually, I'm really interested in this one little thing that you've mentioned only a little tiny bit, so I'm going to have to retask you. You're going to have to do a whole new session based on just that building sort of thing, right? That's what I'm really interested in. Whereas if there was a monitor, that could have been done within the one session. Does that answer your question, or are you more about?
Can I just say one quick thing? Yeah, that's awesome. Because a lot of the practice groups, your practice group is
Get some water?
and like those targets, like here's target number X.
Yeah.
Go, you know. But I think in like a real, whatever, a situation where like you're in a military situation where you're going for a specific thing.
Yeah, you would need.
You need that handler to.
I would love to do that. I think that would be really interesting because, as I say, I think it's a lot more efficient method of getting information. Yeah. But yeah, it's not done.
All right, great. Thank you for your question. I have another question in that area. You'd be the next one. First name?
Okay. My name's Anthony,
Hi.
and my heart is racing right now, so forgive me.
Anthony, really loud.
I'm sorry, my name is Anthony. My heart is racing right now, so please forgive me.
No problem.
I have my quick question, like Nick said. If you were a hypothetical situation, if somebody came up to you and asked you, there's a white van in San Diego, and we need to know the license plate number, and you're under a lot of pressure, and it's time constraints and everything else, can it be done?
Letters are very difficult. I gave the example of Pat Price actually writing down code names.
Yeah.
Pat Price, Ingo, a little bit less than Pat. There's only really a handful of people who've been able to get numbers and letters. They're very difficult, and I think the sort of reason for it is they're more sort of constructs of the analytical mind, right? They're labels for things, right? And as I mentioned, remote viewing is a lot better. Its strength is in description. So remote viewing will be pretty good at describing the white van, not so good at getting the.
So you can get like a specific.
Yeah.
Plate number.
Yeah.
State tag. Or anything like that.
It would be difficult.
Thank you for your question. Any more in that area? Yes.
Well, I just want
First name, please.
Marcy. I just want to point out what you just said, but categorize it in terms of right brain and left brain for the same reason that when you're in a dream, you can't read a document because you're dreaming in another consciousness. That's the reason.
Yeah.
Because it's
Same.
because when I am a psychic, so when we're doing psychic work, it's right brain.
Yes.
So it's harder to access that left brain.
Yes,
I just want to
indeed.
make that
Indeed.
comment.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Thank
that.
you.
Yes. Your first name?
Rena,
You're loud.
in 1997 I had an experience with a remote viewer where they described something from my past and I actually saw it as if I was there. And it opened a whole new realm of memories for me.
Right.
Have you ever had experiences like that where somebody that you are describing a remote viewing session with remembers or has a vision of what you're describing?
Someone
I mean,
else?
It was so vivid. I became nauseated.
Wow.
And almost passed out.
So what's your question in view of that?
Have you ever experienced anything like that with somebody?
I've experienced, I mean, so remote viewing is the wrong name for it, right? It's not just viewing. It's actually all senses. We spoke about all senses, but it's also feeling, how you feel about things, right? So I've done a little bit. I don't like it very much, but I've done a little bit of missing person stuff. It's not really my thing. My thing is the fact that I got the target right or other people have got the target right. That's what excites me. But I also want to use remote viewing where I can to help people. So I've done a little bit of missing people, and one in particular was just very, 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 very sad. Very, you know, I'm actually thinking about it now. Actually, it's given me a little bit of a you know, emotional feeling. So if that's what you mean, then yes, because it's about your own inner. It's about your own inner world and how you feel and how you sense. So you do actually.
It's like he opened something. I can't explain it.
Yeah. No, we're emotional beings.
Yeah.
We pick things up.
I got to ask the question in view of what Rena just said. Are you ever available for a private consultation with someone who has a particular focus? Have you done that before? Is that something you do?
I've done a couple of sessions for people, but to be honest, I'm not a great remote viewer. I'm not a great remote viewer at all. I'm very hit and miss. I will occasionally do something that blows my mind,
Okay.
and that's why I do it. But I don't feel I'm good enough. I'm not going to go on Japanese television and find somebody. Unfortunately, I'm not at that stage. I'm gonna miss, right? So I don't feel good enough charging people for particular remote viewing. I don't mind charging people for training and for my book. You know, there's a lot of effort gone into those things, but not to consult. And again, I'll go back to the fact that I think things. If people want answers to questions, I think they're probably better done as remote viewing groups, right? More than one, and there's analysis and collaboration between the information. Because most of the sort of large-scale projects, Stefan Swartz's work, for example, use that type of methodology, and so therefore that's the way I sort of think about the use of this.
That makes total sense. I can understand. Thank you for that. All right, we have another. We'll go to you, and then we'll go to you. Say your first name, and you get one sentence. Go ahead.
John, do you have a selected bibliography at the end of your book?
Yes.
Specifically, Ingo Swan's book, Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye.
I don't mention that, but
and,
I do have others.
Anne Jacobson's Phenomena.
Yeah.
She in that
What's your
book,
question, I think, is what's your question?
my question
About those
is,
books.
there's a bibliography.
Yeah, there is. My favourite books, or favourite authors are Russell Targ. I've mentioned him a number of times. I just love his books. I think mainly because of the workshop that I went with him. I was just blown away by his approach. The fact he's turned into a very spiritual being because of and he was basically funded by the CIA to sort of turn himself into this sort of like spiritual person. So it's fascinating. I'm familiar with the Annie Jacobson book, but I've not read it, so therefore I didn't include it. I saw some of the people involved did not have very nice things to say about the book, so again, I've not read it. But there are some fascinating histories from a sort of historical point of view about actually what happened. I mentioned those in the book. Paul Smith is one of the best authors on that. He was actually there. He's a great writer. He wrote the government coordinate remote viewing manual, right, at the time in the mid-80s. So he's a very good writer. But yes, there's a big bibliography.
Okay, thank you for your question. Your first name, and really loud because you're sitting all the way in the back in the cheap seats. Go ahead, please. Loud.
10 feet away. Bill.
Yeah.
I want to know, when someone's beginning to enter a remote viewing, where they can actually, they're beginning to actually experience it, is there anything attendant, like sounds sometimes, or feeling, or things that they've never experienced? I mean, I think from what you said, maybe a lot of people are different in how.
Yeah.
Does anything like that happen? Anything that's that maybe they're hearing noise that may not be about what they're about to view, but anything that's sort of initially happening
As an indicator that they're entering the state. Yeah.
Yes.
I've done a lot of meditation recently, so I'm a lot more familiar with it, and I'm bringing that more into to my remote viewing. And I can tell when I'm in a particular state in
And
meditation.
it's not necessarily a remote viewing.
No, I don't think so.
Because I've had experiences where I hear a very loud rumbling sound.
Oh, wow.
Where I'm beginning to see something that I'm experiencing. So I don't think that perhaps was remote viewing, at least not in the way that you described it.
I think people.
I mean, you're saying they're like that remote viewing is a type of psychic kind of phenomenon. I think that's what you just said.
It's an application. It's an application of the psychic. Yeah, it's a way of you know. It's some people are just naturally gifted and can just do it, right? And some people, like such as myself, my own story, right? No psychic experiences whatsoever until I was in a workshop with Russell Tull, and under instruction, I was able to do something on command, basically, that was psychic. That's the thing that I think is fascinating. I think just to answer your question, right? We're all different, and some people I think have different things going on when they get into states.
I wasn't really being taken there. I just visually see something becoming more whatever.
Yep. Cool.
Okay, folks, we're doing really well. Thank you for amazing questions. We have time for a few more, and I want to get to as many as, so it would be one question, well crafted. So John, your first name, you're next.
Apulia, New York. Okay, my question to you is, you said you're not that good a remote viewer, but I'm going to ask you this. Do you know of cases, I have read that when remote viewers are sent out to view something, a place, that they come across other remote viewers, perhaps from the other side, and they recognize each other. Can you please give us one of the more famous cases that may have been written about?
I've heard about it. I don't know of any specific case, but I know there's one little story that they were aware that this sort of thing was happening, that things could happen like this. And one I don't know if this is true, but dressing up a missile base, big missile in a big sort of hangar sort of thing, as though it was a children's party, balloons and crackers and food laid out and stuff like that. The idea being that it would confuse any remote viewer trying to remote view it, right? Because they'd go, well, I don't know what's going on here, right? There seems to be a children's party going on, you know. I don't know if that's true or not, but yes, I've heard the same thing. Unfortunately, I don't know any specifics.
Okay.
Thank you for your question. Well, you're next, please. Your first name and really loud.
Nancy. Okay, I'm going to make this as quickly as possible. I just want to say, first of all, I think we are all capable of psychic abilities. I think that this agenda, they're master occultists. They work with entities. People have been implanted. They're very crafty in implanting chakras so that they can hold people down and prevent them from their abilities. But I think that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and we're all capable of being psychic.
Do you have
Yes.
a question?
Yeah,
I would agree.
The question I have is this. Obviously, remote viewing has been used for beautiful things. However, and I'm just going to share it really quickly, in my very past lifetime, before this one, I was utilized as a remote viewer for a horrible agenda. I was tortured. It was horrible. I was taken over from the Holocaust and utilized. And I just want to know what your feeling is on that about people, being utilized, and particularly even super soldiers that I know in this lifetime have been utilized to do remote viewing for really, really not such nice causes.
Yeah, unfortunately, the SRI program had nothing to do with MK Ultra or anything. So it says, right? So as far as I have read and know, there was no connection with super soldiers or anything nefarious. The program, the papers that have been released are all around, here's some experiments we did, here's our conclusions, here's our next phase of testing, right? So I can't, unfortunately, I've got nothing else to
Thank you for your question.
say.
Okay, we go ahead, all in the back and really loud.
Hello,
First name?
my name is Francisco. My question is, have you explored the idea of the military is spending so much money, I'll say millions, billions, who knows how much in black projects for remote viewing, and you would think that they want to weaponize it in some way, whether it be for positive or negative purposes. But the idea is, do you think that they explore the idea of secrecy. So on a psychic level, you have human beings that are suppressing and obfuscating information to keep something secret or like project, right? And through that, there could be leakage or just on a psychic level, everybody's either lying or suppressing the information, everything is top secret, that actually leaks out, and then you become like a lighthouse where somebody wants to remote view, and you're actually more detectable. You see where I'm going with this?
So what's your question then?
Secrets are...
Secrets?
So
human beings are keeping secrets in these black
yes,
projects and
yes,
secret bases.
yes.
So you have a remote viewer
Yes.
trying to find information out.
Yes.
And the fact that they are suppressing the information, they are naturally keeping it within themselves, and a lot of times lying about it, this doesn't exist, whatever, that there's leakage
Yes.
on a psychic level that it wants to be found out.
Okay.
And then that becomes a light. You know,
Yeah. No, absolutely. In fact, on the NSA, the Sugar Hill example I gave, right? Supposedly they were remote viewing the log cabin, and they end up down the road at the secret site. One of the things that came out of that, and Russell says this, is that the more you try and hide something, the more it shines psychically, right? So that's why they went there, because it was far more interesting. They were trying to hide it. Pat Price is writing down the code names. So yes, I would agree with that.
Thank you for your question. Please stand up and give us your name and very loudly your one question.
Hello, my name is Armani.
Really loud, please.
Hello, my name is Armani.
Really, raise your voice.
Okay, I have a soft voice. Hello, my name is Armani. My question is, what kinds of technologies do you use to augment remote viewing?
Okay, yeah. What type of technology is used to augment remote viewing? Yeah, thank you. Good question. I think we're all aware of binaural beats, stuff like that. So, that was used a little bit. The Monroe Institute, the military had a contract with Bob Monroe. They used to send people down there. Joe McMoneagle spent a lot of time down there, so much that he ended up marrying Monroe's daughter. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So a big connection with the Monroe Institute binaural beats, but not for remote viewing, but for that cool down period and for that general sense of well-being and relaxation and all the rest of it that you get from that sort of altered state. So it wasn't really used, and in fact, Russell Targ and Swartz and the rest of them, they always get questions like this, right? What can we do to help? And their answer is, you just need to practice getting into that meditative state, that initial state that you can then go into remote viewing. You need to practice that bit before you actually start the remote viewing. So you can get into that state more quickly and more efficiently. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, that's the main thing that comes up.
Okay, we need to move because the time is clicking. Thank you for your
Alpha.
question. Okay, we're going to go. Okay, please stand up. Please stand up and very loudly your first name and one sentence.
My question to you is, do you have an acute ability to see things? In other words, when I see something similar to Tesla was able to remember things photographically.
Yeah.
Okay, so my question to you, because you have psychic ability, do you have photogenic memory?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all.
Myself, I'm able to
Okay, we're running out of time, so you had your question. Thank you for your question. You're next. Please stand up, your first name, and loud.
Doreen, and my question to you is, did you ever experience or know of divine intervention in remote viewing?
No, but you've reminded me of a couple of things. I've not, right? As I say, I'm not a big psychic. I'm not even a great remote viewer, right? So I'm able every now and again to describe things that I'm constantly sort of surprised at. Where the hell did that come from? So that's my sort of divine intervention. But you've reminded me of a couple of things. Somebody remote viewing Buddha, and just drawing a sort of a massive sort of ball of light and sort of energy coming out of it, sort of thing, and within this sort of massive, this little sketch of things, just a little sort of outline of a person. So I thought that was interesting. And another thing, and I think this is a brilliant story. Somebody describes There's a couple of magazines on remote viewing for the remote viewing enthusiast. Remote Viewing Monthly. There's some great articles in this. One of them is this guy describing his first sort of remote viewing session, and remote viewing is blind, so he doesn't know what the target is. He describes he doesn't know what he's describing, right? He's not describing a thing, but basically he ends up just on a blank piece of paper. He just writes love. And he goes, and somebody says, well, how did your session go? And he goes, well, it was really weird, right? I just thought that's basically all I wrote. What was the target? What's the cure for cancer?
Whoa. Interesting.
Isn't that wonderful?
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that question. You're next. Please stand up, if you will.
I really am.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. And
Okay,
who are you?
Naomi. I'd like to ask you, since you mentioned Robert Monroe, does remote viewing involve out-of-body experience? Do you have to go out-of-body to remote view?
No.
And also, have the remote viewers remote viewed President Trump and his future, and what are the findings?
All right, good question. Wow. All right. Here we go. All right, go ahead.
Okay. No, not out of body is different from remote viewing. Remote viewing, you're sitting at a desk. You've got your pen in your hand. You're fairly conscious. You know, you're not in that sort of state where you're doing out of body, right? You're sort of writing things down. You're going through the process, right? You're sitting at a desk, right? Your eyes are open. However, ERV, I mentioned, extended remote viewing, wherein you're in that sort of sleepy state. There's a few sort of occurrences of people saying, yeah, I was really there. I was on the battlefield is one thing, right? Somebody was tasked with a Hastings 1066, and they're going, oh, I'm being hit by arrows and stuff, right? So the person felt that they were very much there. They were sort of so much that it was visceral, right? So that's the sort of connection. But in general, the answer is no. It's very different processes.
Thank you for your question. Great question. We have you, and then you'll be the last. You got to hand up too. All right, we've got 3 more people, so please make it very concise. Please go ahead.
Hi, so John, Sharon.
Hi, Sharon.
Can you remote view into the future and the past?
Yes.
And then just one other question: have you, in your travels, have you remote viewed like off planet, Mars, or have you met ETs?
Great question.
Like,
Okay.
Reptilian or?
I have not. It's not an interest of mine. I'm more interested in getting the target right, and it's a teapot, right? And that's what I'm excited about, unfortunately. However, there is a lot of stuff. If you Google that sort of stuff online, you'll find lots of it. I mentioned Monocle doing Mars. That's just one example. There's lots of others.
Thanks for the question. Great. You're next. Please stand, if you will, please stand up. And
Me?
your first, yes, and your first name and your.
Fiona. Hi. So I'm kind of trying to. My question would be on the techniques of when someone has their target and when they're immediately getting into it, because I feel that the vision is blurry for me, so I can't get deeply into it. But would, for example, like different sounds, like if I could pick up like a music that like something that's popular and try to like make my way to that spot, or is it just come immediately to you?
No.
Okay, so it's like a progress. For example, maybe I can like walk through it. Is like, so for example, there's a popular song that comes on. I'm just gonna say like Green Day popular, and I'm like, okay, let's go into like the era of when that song was made, for example, and then you could like see what Green Day was doing on that particular day, for example. Maybe. That's like one short step. So would it be like that? Would remote viewing be like a pathway doing that like that way, or is it just immediately comes to you?
No, it doesn't immediately come to you.
Okay.
So I think I started on it earlier, right? So it's the idea is to start with each of the senses individually. So there's a target which you're blind to, right? You don't actually know what it is. You're just, now you've got to feel your way around, right? And it's using each of the senses individually. And what you're doing is you're sort of building up a bit of a picture to the extent where you can then get into what's the function, what's the purpose, why, So you start with the what, and it's very, descriptors, and then you work. And what you're doing is you're sort of drilling holes in a door such that eventually there's a larger hole, and then you can see through, and then you can see it. So some people, some sort of natural psychics maybe can see the target sort of straight away and get all the information. But for those of us that aren't great psychics, this method certainly works for me to a certain extent.
Thank you for your question. We have one more question, and then I'm going to ask John if he'll give some final comments. We have about maybe 10 more minutes tops. So any other final thoughts you have would be welcome.
Right.
So, okay, please go ahead. Your first name and then really loud.
Jan, Coast to Coast, they talk a lot about missing people, especially from state parks.
Yes.
Do you know what happens to them at all?
No, I've not done that. I know it's a very interesting topic and a serious topic, right? There's a lot of people that go missing under some very strange circumstances. I'm aware of that. I've not done any work on that myself. As I say, my main driver is talking to other people about it, training people to do it themselves. I'm not a great remote viewer, but I am driven to spread the word more. So that's more my thing.
Thank you for your great questions.
Yes.
Okay, everybody here, thank you again for the questions I told John this group is going to give you some great questions, and you certainly did, and thank you for that. Okay, so now we have about 10 more minutes before we have to wrap, and I just wanted to leave that little bit of time for you, for any other thoughts or whatever you want to say, please.
Well, the first thing to say is to absolutely agree with you for the questions. Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. I'm sorry I didn't sort of play back the questions and repeat your names and stuff like that. I'm conscious of time a little bit, but thank you so much for the questions. They were great. I'm happy to answer. If you wanted to email me, I think you can send on my email as well. I'm happy for you to do that. If anyone's got any questions, you'll send out a link to the group as well.
I will.
So the idea of the group is it's open and friendly. You don't have to know about remote viewing quite often. As I say, I have new people basically every time I run it. So quite often it's like, okay, well, I don't know anything about it. So okay, all right, and we'll run through some of the basics. That's fine. So it's open to anyone.
And I will post that to everybody. I'll do that by tomorrow. You'll get that. So.
Great. But yeah, I'm happy if you wanted to ask me any specific questions that we haven't covered. That would be good as well. I don't know. I could talk. If you wanted me to talk about anything in specific, or
to say to you is I do a podcast and called Disclosure Network with Nick. That's once a month, and I would love to have you as my guest in the next few months. So we'll talk about your schedule if you'd be kind enough.
No, I'd be happy to.
That would be wonderful. I'd love to do that with you. The last part I would just like to go to is what in the future, your future, either for yourself or for other remote viewers, what questions or areas do you feel as though are the most worthy to remote view and to explore? Are there particular questions or ongoing thoughts that you feel if I will or other remote viewers will get more deeply into those areas? What would you choose in that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I don't really have much of an answer. I believe that remote viewing really should be used for the two purposes I think it's most impactful. And it's not gambling, which is where it's mainly used at the moment, right?
Okay.
I think
all right.
My beliefs are the impact it's had on my own life.
Of course.
Right? Which is that realization that we're more than physical beings.
Absolutely.
I think everybody needs to know that. I think
That's
if everybody
huge.
Knew that.
But is that huge or not? And that goes into even the subject of peace on this planet.
Exactly.
And
fundamentally
extended
change
of this planet. That keys into all those incredible areas that it's never been more important that we really address now.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I can see that.
So that's my first thing, right? Which is why I've written the book, and it's why I run the meetup, right? Just to try and spread the word and get other people to have that same experience that I had. I think the second area that would be most useful is to answer some questions, and I think there's two aspects to that. There's sort of historical questions, the whole sort of JFK thing.
Oh boy. Oh yeah.
Pyramid thing you mentioned, right? You know.
9/11.
Yes,
certainly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Daz Smith, a lovely guy who lives in England, in Bath. Again, if you Google him, you'll find a lot of stuff on him. He did under Courtney Brown's direction. I think he and I've forgotten the gentleman's name. He lives in Hawaii. They did 9/11. There's videos on that, which are very interesting.
There's a group now, the 9/11 lawyers group,
yes,
who's now petitioned and have a court date. And I'm having the head lawyer as my guest in a future
excellent.
podcast.
Oh, wow.
So you can, and believe me, he is dynamite. And that area alone, I'm very fascinated with that. And we have to get to the truth before we can really progress.
Yeah.
Those questions have to be answered because the people, the perpetrators, are still walking around. Yeah. And that's very alarming on so many levels, right? So that would be one. Also, Antarctica. There's so much going on that subject. And right, I would love if some remote you or someone else would address that whole subject of what is really up with Antarctica. There's a lot of stuff on the YouTube and on the internet, and I would just like to get really into that. I think that's important.
So let me try and make a distinction. And also there's a part B to my second part of answering your question. But let me make a distinction. You know, we mentioned the fact that UFOs are, you know, there's been a history of remote viewing and UFOs, and the fact that you can't say, yes, you're right, because you don't know. Mm-hmm. So that would be the same problem with Antarctica. Mm-hmm. I think the twist on what I said was we should use it to answer questions is we should use it to answer questions that we can then verify. So in the case of JFK, if remote viewing could actually help us find some information, which then could be backed up by actually going to find the evidence that proves that that's actually the case, that's what I'm talking about, right? Not to say that, oh yeah, aliens built the pyramids. How do you prove that, right? You can't, right? So using remote viewing to then be an indicator, a pointer to something that can then be dug up, either physically or metaphorically, that then proves that actually, yes, that's actually the case, right? So that's the twist I'd like to put on that. But I think there's a whole bunch of historical questions that could be answered. Now, my sort of part B to answering questions topic is personal questions, right? So missing people, lost things, helping people. People struggle with a whole bunch of issues in their lives, and I think remote viewing can possibly help people as well. So that the bigger historical questions and then the personal aspects. So I think those three things, right? The fact that we're more than physical beings, and then answering questions, both historical and personal. I think that's what remote viewing should be doing.
John Noble, you are an absolute delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nick.